When the lawyer cleared his throat, the room stilled. You know that sound, the one that tells you your life's about to take a sharp left turn and no one's handing out seat belts? That was the sound. I was sitting in a stiff-backed chair in my grandfather's parlor, the scent of old wood and lemon polish curling around us like a memory. The fireplace crackled despite the warm spring day, as if it too wanted to bear witness. Martha, my older sister, sat to my left, cross-legged in a designer pantsuit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her expression was politely bored, the kind she reserved for people she thought were beneath her. Me mostly. Mr. Halbert, our family lawyer and the only man on earth who could still rock a bow tie unironically, adjusted his glasses. The last will and testament of Frederick Lane. He began. It wasn't supposed to be dramatic. My grandfather, God rest his eccentric, weather-stained soul, hadn't exactly left behind a kingdom. Just an old house, some land, and a coin collection he used to polish with obsessive care. We all assumed Martha would get the bulk of it. That's what Martha assumed anyway. She was always the favorite, or so she thought. I never argued. I didn't need the things. I had the memories. So when Mr. Halbert read, "The farmhouse at 419, Bellwether Lane, and all its contents I leave in full to my granddaughter Megan Lane," Martha snapped. What? Her voice cracked like a whip across the room. No. No. That must be a mistake. The house? All of it? That was supposed to be mine. My pulse thudded in my ears. I wasn't expecting anything, certainly not the house. I hadn't even thought of it as a possibility. Are you sure? I whispered. I felt like someone had handed me a birthday cake I hadn't asked for, and now everyone was staring. I'm quite certain, Mr. Halbert said, unfazed. Your grandfather was clear in his instructions. Martha turned to me, eyes narrowed. You manipulated him. What? No. I didn't even know I started, but she stood up, nostrils flaring like a pissed-off show pony. This is ridiculous. He showed me the house, told me I'd take care of it one day. I was supposed to. She clamped her mouth shut, lips pale. That was the first crack. Something in her face, not rage, but panic. That kind of panic you feel when a sure thing slips through your fingers. She stormed out without another word, the click of her heels a staccato beat of fury against the wooden floor. Mr. Halbert closed the folder gently. Your grandfather had his reasons. I nodded numbly, heart clanging like a bell. I didn't know what they were, but I would learn. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the deed like it might vanish. The farmhouse. The old creaky place with the rusted swing out front and the hummingbird feeders on every windowsill. It was mine now. But why? And then I remembered. One summer when I was maybe 12, I'd watched Grandpa slip a shiny, odd-looking coin into a small crack in the wall behind the pantry. He'd winked at me. A little insurance policy, he'd said. I'd forgotten. But Martha hadn't. And now? I had the house. I didn't yet know the storm she was about to bring to my door. The first text came before sunrise. Martha, we need to talk. Meet me at the house at 9. Do not ignore this. I hadn't even finished brushing my teeth before my phone buzzed again. Martha, if you don't show, I'll assume you're hiding something. Classic Martha immediate escalation, as if any reluctance on my part meant guilt instead of, needing time to process the fact I just inherited an entire house. At 9:05, I pulled up to Bellwether Lane in my dented Honda Civic. The old farmhouse stood just like I remembered, some bleached siding, porch swing lazily in the breeze. The screen door creaked because of course it did. That door hadn't stopped creaking since the 70s. Martha was already pacing the porch, heels now replaced by flat designer loafers, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She looked at the place like it had personally offended her. About time, she snapped as I stepped out. I thought maybe you'd already moved in. Claimed squatters' rights or something. Good morning to you too, I said, trying to keep it light, but my stomach was a knot of nerves. She didn't waste time. Listen, Megan. Grandpa was sick. He probably didn't realize what he was doing. You and I both know I was supposed to inherit this place. I didn't ask for this, I said quietly. I didn't even know it was coming. Her eyes narrowed. Oh, please. You practically lived here every summer. You were his little assistant, playing house. Of course he gave it to you. He got soft in the head. I clenched my jaw. He wasn't soft. He knew exactly what he was doing. Wrong answer. Her tone dropped into that cold, polite register I hated. Well, I've spoken to a lawyer. Of course she had. There's a chance we can challenge the will, she continued. Undue influence. You spent more time with him toward the end. That's suspicious. He was my grandfather. And I loved him. My voice cracked. That's not suspicious. That's normal. She shrugged, like love was just another tactic on the board. Fine. If it comes to that, I'm prepared. But I'd rather avoid a public court case. That house isn't worth much. Old and falling apart. You probably don't even want it. She stepped closer. So here's my offer, sell it to me. I'll give you $50,000. That's generous, Megan. Take the money, start over somewhere else. I stared at her. And that's when it clicked. She didn't want the house. She wanted what was in it. I didn't know what, not yet. But I remembered the way Grandpa had told me, joking but not, keep this place in the family, sweetheart. It holds more than just memories. Something inside me straightened. A kind of stubbornness I'd always had but never used around Martha. No. Her eyes flared. Excuse me. I'm not selling. Not to you. She exhaled through her nose. Then I hope you're ready for a fight. She turned and stalked down the porch steps, already dialing someone on her phone. Probably that fancy lawyer of hers. As her car peeled away, I stepped inside the house. It was quiet. Dust motes floated in the sunlight like little ghosts. I pressed my hand to the pantry wall right where Grandpa had once hidden that coin. Whatever Martha remembered, I'd forgotten. But now I was starting to remember everything. The first few days back in the house felt like stepping into an old photograph, comforting, dusty, slightly out of focus. Every creak of the floorboards brought back summers barefoot on wood, dragging lemonade and bug spray through the halls. Grandpa's tools still hung in the shed with military precision, and his favorite plaid jacket rested on the hook by the back door, like he might walk in any minute and shrug it on. I slept on a squeaky air mattress in what used to be the guest room, now cluttered with boxes labeled junk and his shaky handwriting. Martha's threats circled my brain like gnats, but I ignored her texts and focused on cleaning, on remembering. Until I opened the basement door. I hadn't gone down there in years. Grandpa called it the treasure cave, mostly as a joke. It was dark, musty, filled with old farm equipment in canning jars that hadn't seen a peach since 1982. But on the third day, something pulled me toward it, maybe instinct, maybe memory. I pulled the chain light and descended the creaky stairs. The air was damp and thick with nostalgia and mildew. Nothing had changed except maybe me. I passed the old workbench and headed toward the far corner where Grandpa used to keep locked storage trunks. He said they were full of boring old man stuff. I never pushed. But now? Now I had a reason to look. Behind an old crate of rusted tools and something that might once have been a bicycle, I found it. A small wooden box. Oak. With brass hinges. It wasn't locked. I opened it. Inside was a stack of envelopes wrapped in twine. Letters, faded and yellowing, written in Grandpa's looping hand. Addressed to my grandmother mostly. Love letters. I clutched them to my chest, momentarily overwhelmed. They'd been married 53 years when she passed. These weren't just memories. They were devotion in ink. But underneath the letters there it was. Coins. Neatly stacked rows, nestled in velvet-lined slots. Pennies, quarters, $half, but at the very center sat a gleaming silver coin in its own protective case. It looked unreal. A woman's profile, hair flowing like waves across the face of the coin. The date stamped clearly beneath her chin, 1794. I gasped. No, not gasped, gasped. The kind of sound you make when reality buckles. Because I remembered now. I was maybe 10 when Grandpa, tipsy on blackberry wine and nostalgia, had shown it to us during a thunderstorm. Most valuable coin in the country, he said, and I trust you girls not to tell a soul. He winked, and Martha's eyes locked on that coin like a hawk. She'd never forgotten. That's why she wanted the house. But now it was here in my hands. I gently cradled the coin, heart pounding. I wasn't naive anymore. I was the girl who stayed, who listened, who loved. And this coin? It wasn't just silver. It was proof that Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. And Martha? Oh, she had no idea what was coming. The next morning I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, my friend Sonia, who I'd gone to college with. We hadn't spoken in a while, but she'd gone full legal eagle, specializing in estate law and asset protection. I didn't tell her about the coin right away. I just said, something valuable turned up in the house and I want to know my rights. Her answer? If the will states the house and its contents go to you and the will is valid, it's yours. End of story. What did you find? I hesitated, then sent her a photo. There was a long pause on the other end. Megan, do you have any idea what that is? I swallowed. A rare coin. She gave a dry little laugh. That's not just rare. That's a 1794 flowing hair silver dollar. If it's genuine, and I mean authenticated by a proper numismatist, that coin could be worth anywhere between $7 million and $10 million. I sat down on the floor. My knees didn't work anymore. Sonia cleared her throat. You need to get it appraised immediately. And you need to not breathe a word to anyone else until it's secure. I think my sister knows, I admitted. Oh God, she muttered. That explains the legal saber rattling. Then came the kicker. If she tries to claim it was shown to her years ago or that there's an updated will, get everything in writing. Don't meet her without representation. Too late. Because not 20 minutes after I hung up, my doorbell rang. Martha, wearing big sunglasses, a tight smile, and holding a manila folder. She didn't wait for me to invite her in. Just brushed past me like it was still her house. Look, Megan, she began, placing the folder on the kitchen table like it was a bomb. I want to be civil, but I've spoken with my attorney. And surprise! Grandpa left an updated will. This one leaves the house to both of us. I opened the folder. It was a blurry, unnotarized photocopy of a Word doc. No signatures. No witnesses. This is fake, I said, voice flat. Martha blinked. Excuse me. Grandpa's will was formal, notarized, and filed. This looks like something you whipped up in Google Docs during a Chardonnay bender. Her eyes flashed. You'd really keep everything for yourself? After all I've done for this family. What have you done, Martha? I said, finally letting my voice rise. Besides circle Grandpa like a vulture every time he got the sniffles? Her expression cracked for just a second, anger, guilt, something ugly. Then she straightened. You're making a mistake, she hissed. You think you're clever. But I'll find a way to get what's mine. I stepped forward calmly. You already did, Martha. For years you got the praise, the attention, the assumption that you'd inherit. But Grandpa saw through it. You didn't get the house because you didn't deserve it. I did. And with that I opened the door. She stood there, vibrating with fury. I'm not done, she snapped. I smiled sweetly. I think you are. She left, tires screeching, folder flapping in the wind. I closed the door. Locked it. Then I walked back to the basement. I had a treasure to protect. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house made me bolt upright, convinced Martha had come back with a crowbar and a grudge. I kept the coin locked in Grandpa's old tackle box, which I then hid under the floorboards in the bedroom closet. Yes, just like a movie. I didn't care if it was paranoid. I wasn't losing the one thing he'd left me that Martha actually wanted. The next morning, I drove 2 towns over to see an appraiser Sonia had recommended. A quiet, clean-shaven man named Mr. Gupta with a gentle voice and thick glasses that made him look perpetually surprised. His storefront was wedged between a dusty bookstore and a donut shop. He greeted me like I was carrying a kitten, not a multimillion-dollar piece of metal. He took one look at the coin and whistled low. Where did you say you found this? He asked, not looking up from his magnifying lens. In a box. In my grandfather's basement. He set it down slowly like it might explode. This isn't just rare. This is nearly pristine for its age. If this is a genuine 1794 flowing hair dollar, and from what I can see it is, you're sitting on a treasure. I laughed nervously. Like, how much treasure are we talking? He leaned back, hands folded. Recent auctions have sold similar coins between $7 and $10 million. One even went for $12. It depends on the condition, provenance, and the buyer. My mouth went dry. He must have noticed because he quickly added, I can connect you with 2 trusted auction houses. Both have handled coins like this before. But I strongly recommend hiring a lawyer to manage the sale and ensure taxes and ownership are airtight. Already done, I thought, thanking past me for calling Sonia. I left his office gripping a folder filled with certificates, photos, and valuations. It felt heavier than any coin. That evening, I stood alone in the farmhouse living room, folder in hand. I looked around at the sagging beams, the wallpaper peeling from the corners like old scabs. This house wasn't worth much on paper, but in that moment it felt like a cathedral. Because it wasn't about the money. It was about why Grandpa left it to me. Because I was the one who stayed. Who listened. Who didn't ask him for things but offered him company, kindness, and help hauling hay bales even when I was 12 and useless. This wasn't just inheritance. This was trust. I put the folder in the same tackle box as the coin, locked it tight, and slid it back under the floorboards. I could almost hear Grandpa's voice in my head. "Atta girl." Outside, the porch light flickered on as dusk fell. Inside, the house felt like mine. Really mine. It didn't take long for word to get out. I never told Martha directly, God, no, but someone must have said something. Maybe it was one of the lawyers she sent sniffing around, or maybe she was just a professional snoop. Either way, I got a call from Sonia 2 days after the appraisal. "She's trying to file an injunction," she said bluntly, "claiming you're hiding family assets and obstructing rightful inheritance." I choked on my coffee. Is that even a thing? It's not a thing if it's your coin in your house, from your grandfather's collection, legally willed to you, Sonia replied. But that doesn't stop people from trying. Great. So we filed paperwork of our own, statements from the appraiser, the original will, a notarized inventory of the estate from the lawyer who handled Grandpa's affairs. Sonia made it so airtight, Martha could have thrown a Molotov cocktail at it and it still wouldn't burn. But then came Martha's final play. She showed up with a buyer. Not a lawyer. Not a family friend. A buyer. "I have an offer," she said one afternoon, appearing at my front porch like a villain in a made-for-TV drama. She wore sunglasses and too much perfume, and behind her stood a tall, silver-haired man with a briefcase and a face that screamed too many NDAs. "I'm not interested," I said immediately. "You haven't even heard it." "Let me guess," I said, stepping onto the porch and crossing my arms. "You want to buy the house, get me to sign something I don't read, and suddenly I've handed over the coin too." Her smile didn't waver. "You really think I'm that underhanded?" "I think you had a fake will printed off Staples.com," I replied. The buyer cleared his throat. "If I may, Ms. Lane, I represent an anonymous collector who is offering $5 million cash for the house and any historical artifacts it contains." I raised an eyebrow. "Cash?" He nodded solemnly. "Sir, with all due respect, you just described a crime scene." I turned on my heel and walked inside. Locked the door behind me. Through the window, I saw Martha arguing with the man, flailing her arms, furious that her plan was unraveling in real time. I didn't sleep that night either. But this time it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. Because now I knew for certain she wasn't just trying to get even. She knew what the coin was worth. But so did I. And I had already accepted an invitation to Sotheby's. The auction was scheduled for 3 weeks later in New York. They arranged security, transport, even a full-page glossy feature in the catalog. The coin's photo was so crisp I half expected it to wink at me. I flew out with Sonia, keeping the coin under lock and key until the moment of handoff. I didn't tell anyone else. Not my friends. Not even my hairdresser. It felt too sacred, too risky. I didn't even post on social media, which for me is basically like entering witness protection. The night before the auction, Sonia and I had dinner at a quiet rooftop bar. The city buzzed below us, and for once I felt untouchable. "You nervous?" she asked, sipping a martini. "Terrified," I admitted. She smiled. "That means you care." "That's good." The next morning, the coin sold for $9.1 million. To a private collector in Singapore. After auction fees and taxes, I cleared just over $7 million. I didn't cry. But I did spend 5 full minutes in the ladies' room staring at my reflection, wondering how the girl who used to pick tomatoes barefoot in her grandfather's garden had ended up here. And then I smiled. Because the best part? Martha had no clue until she read about it afterward. $7 million. You'd think I'd be on a yacht or flinging champagne off a balcony by now. But that's not me. I didn't want the world, I just wanted one thing. To bring the farmhouse back to life. So I called in contractors. Real ones, not the sketchy kind who show up 3 hours late with a half-empty toolbox in dreams of becoming the next HGTV star. These were professionals. I handed them a vision and a budget, and then I rolled up my sleeves and joined them. Every day, I wore the same pair of worn jeans and Grandpa's flannel jacket, now threadbare at the elbows. I painted walls. I scraped floors. I replaced broken banisters with my own calloused hands and wiped sweat from my brow with the same rag he used to clean engine oil. Martha did call twice. Once to accuse me of manipulating an old man's affection for financial gain, and once to extend an olive branch, read, ask for money. I didn't answer either time. Instead, I called the local historical society and got the house registered as a landmark. Grandpa had always dreamed of it. By fall, the farmhouse was something else entirely. Gone were the sagging beams and chipped siding. The porch was wider, the floors gleamed, and the old garden, once a graveyard of forgotten tomato cages, bloomed with wild flowers and heirloom vegetables. But I didn't go full Pinterest. I kept it ours. The kitchen still smelled like lemon oil and wood smoke. The hummingbird feeders still hung on the windows. And above the mantel I placed a framed photo of Grandpa in his overalls, holding up a jar of pickles with a proud grin like it was the crown jewels. Beneath the photo, I added a small brass plaque. He left me an old house. But in reality he left me everything. I moved in permanently that October. It wasn't about the money. Not anymore. It was about roots. About turning grief and chaos into something living, something I could walk barefoot through again. One crisp evening I brewed a cup of tea, wrapped myself in a blanket, and sat on the porch swing. The sun dipped behind the hills, casting gold over the cornfields. The wind rustled the trees gently, like a whisper. I smiled. Because I wasn't lost. I was home. I was sanding down the last of the pantry shelves when I found it, tucked between the back panel and the wall like a secret only the house could keep. An envelope. Yellowed at the edges. My name written on the front in Grandpa's unmistakable handwriting. I didn't open it right away. For a moment I just held it, fingers trembling, forehead pressed to the cool wood of the pantry. That tiny envelope felt heavier than the coin had ever been. I carried it outside, sat on the porch swing, and took a deep breath of October air. The leaves were turning gold and crimson, and the whole world smelled like apples and endings. Then finally I opened it. Dear Meg, if you're reading this, it means the old place is yours now. And that means I did something right. I imagine your sister is fuming. She always had a way of turning birthdays into court cases. Don't let her take this from you. You were the one who showed up when the pipes burst. You knew where I kept the cinnamon. You laughed at my bad jokes and helped me up the stairs when my hip went rogue. That kind of love can't be faked, and I want you to know. I saw it. That coin you found, it's real. And it's valuable. But more than that, it was a test. Years ago, Martha saw it and tried to convince me to sell it. Said it was wasted on dust and memories. I told her it was staying right where it was. She didn't like that. But I think you understand, some things aren't for sale. If you found it and you found this letter, then you know what to do. Or maybe you already did it. Use it to build something good. Not flashy. Just true. Something that lasts. And when you're done, sit on that porch and think of me. Love you always. Grandpa. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just sat there, letter in hand, I scanning those lines again and again like maybe the ink would smudge into more. When the tears did come, they were quiet. Not the kind that hurt, just the kind that heal. I folded the letter gently, placed it in a frame, and hung it next to his photo. And that night, I baked cinnamon bread. The kind he loved. The kind he used to say, tastes like home. I poured 2 mugs of tea. One for me, one for the man who never really left. The story could have ended there, me in a cozy farmhouse with fresh bread, framed letters, and a ghost of a man I loved sitting on my shoulder. But the world had other plans. 2 months after the auction, a local reporter called. I almost didn't pick up. I thought it was another one of Martha's anonymous voicemails pretending to be a long-lost cousin. But the woman on the line was earnest, young, and had clearly done her homework. Are you Megan Lane? The one who inherited the Bellwether farmhouse and sold the flowing hair coin. I paused. That's oddly specific. Who are you with? The Courier. I'm working on a story about small-town legacies. I heard yours was special. That was the beginning. At first I hesitated. I didn't want to be a headline. I didn't want people thinking I got lucky or rich or vindicated. But the more we talked, the more I realized this wasn't about the money. It was about the why. The article came out a week later. The coin, the house, and the girl who stayed. It spread like spilled honey. Sweet. Sticky. Impossible to ignore. Emails flooded in. Old neighbors. High school teachers. Strangers who'd cared for their grandparents in silence and solitude and wondered if anyone noticed. One stood out. A history professor from a university in Boston. Ms. Lane, your grandfather's coin is more than a collector's dream. It's a piece of our nation's story. The $1,794 was the first minted silver coin ever issued by the U.S. It's believed that fewer than 150 still exist, and even fewer are in that condition. Your decision to preserve and auction it, rather than sell it in secret, has added to our historical record. Thank you. We'd like to invite you to speak at our upcoming symposium on American numismatics. I blinked at the email. Me, the girl who once glued her fingers together during craft hour. The one who got AC in public speaking. I didn't accept right away. But I printed the email, folded it gently, and tucked it next to Grandpa's letter. Another kind of treasure. The second surprise came in the form of a check from Sotheby's, a bonus from the collector. Apparently he'd read the article too. For honoring history with heart, the note said. Martha saw the article, of course. She emailed me once. Just one line. You always did know how to play the long game. I didn't respond. Because I hadn't played anything. I just stayed when it counted. Spring came slowly that year, muddy boots, foggy mornings, the kind of thaw that feels like the world exhaling after holding its breath too long. The farmhouse creaked with life. Windows open. Music playing low from an old radio in the kitchen. Birds arguing cheerfully at the feeders. I kept Grandpa's old flannel jacket hanging by the door, even though I didn't wear it much anymore. It just felt right, like part of the house. I'd spent the winter settling into a rhythm, coffee at sunrise, long walks through the woods behind the property, afternoons spent in the garden or in town volunteering at the Historical Society, who now adored me thanks to my rescue of a national artifact, their words, not mine. I didn't spend recklessly. I didn't move to a city or buy a sports car. I didn't even upgrade my old Civic, though I did finally get the check engine light diagnosed. Because this was never about becoming someone new. It was about becoming myself, without shame or apology. I used part of the money to set up a scholarship in Grandpa's name, for kids in our county who wanted to study history, agriculture, or just something real. I worked with Sonia to build it right, low red tape, high impact. We called it the Frederick Lane Foundation. Our first recipient was a 17-year-old girl who wanted to be a preservationist. When I handed her the acceptance letter, she cried. I did too. One night, just after planting season began, I made a pot of tea, grabbed an old quilt, and sat on the porch swing. The sun dipped behind the trees, the sky that particular kind of gold that makes everything feel like a memory you're already missing. Inside, the house was warm and clean, a home again. On the mantel, Grandpa's photo still smiled back at me, crinkled eyes and all. Beneath it, that little brass plaque. He left me an old house. But in reality, he left me everything. I took a slow sip of tea and let myself feel it all: grief, gratitude, pride, peace. I'd been the quiet one. The helper. The one everyone underestimated. But I was the one who stayed. And in the end, I didn't just inherit a house or a coin. I inherited legacy. I inherited love. I inherited the strength to hold my ground when everything else tried to shake me. And now? Now I was home. The porch creaked. The wind whispered. Somewhere a hummingbird zipped past, beating its tiny wings like it had somewhere important to be. I just smiled and rocked gently with the swing. Because for once I didn't have to be anywhere else.